Hello guys, Pablo here. Welcome to this lecture, Introduction to Symfony. We're going to cover today some basic concepts regarding the development of web applications using Symfony. Let's begin by the very basics. What are web applications, web apps? It's basically software that works over the internet to which you access using a web browser. You have two sides. There's the client side, which is executed on the user's computer. The languages used on that side are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's used to show the user what's happening on the web application and to get the user input. On the server side, there are multiple languages you can use. Throughout this course, we'll be using PHP and the Symfony framework. For database engine, we'll be using MySQL. Now, what is Symfony? Symfony is a PHP framework and it's a toolbox. It is not only that, but also it's a methodology, a way of creating your application so that it's organized, stable, scalable. And Symfony is also a community of developers who've created this open source framework. And also who work on extensions and plugins for this framework. The benefits of using Symfony is that it enforces best practices. It basically forces you to use a certain way of working to put your files in certain folders. It's all flexible that you can change as well, but if you don't go into changing it, you're forced to use a certain folder structure that makes the code very organized. It's easy for other people who need to collaborate with you to know where each thing is, so that you don't have to worry about creating tools, but you worry instead of just making your web app. The code is easier to maintain and it's all modular up to the point where the actual Symfony framework is a plugin within a Symfony application. Some basic HTTP concepts that are the core concept on how Symfony works. The client side makes a request to the server. The server does processing, database queries, and it sends back a response. That's the most important thing in web applications, and it's ridiculously simple, but you are not going to believe how often developers forget about this and don't think with this model in mind when they're making web applications. The usual flow when it comes to Symfony is firstly there's a request from the client and it has a domain name and it will have some URL afterwards. This URL part are called routes in Symfony. The front controller app.php will get this request. It'll be sent then to the kernel, which is the heart of the Symfony application. In the kernel, libraries are loaded and a few other configuration related things happen. But your route, in this case hello world, will be taken care of by the routing engine. If that route is found, it will point to a certain controller, a controller file. And in Symfony, actions are basically methods inside a controller that you can point to using routes. Always, in every single of these cycles, the action has to return a response object, and that will carry out the response that will eventually be sent back to the client. And the response can be HTML, JSON, XML, image files, anything that you can think of. But this is the way it flows. Some more concepts. In Symfony, everything is a bundle. Bundles are the way that that's how plugins are called. Modular pieces of code that have their own functionality. So all the code that you create will be inside of bundles. Third-party libraries are put in bundles as well. Even the actual Symfony library is treated as a bundle. There's templates where the views are stored to show the user. Those views can be PHP views, or they can use a language called Twig, which is a templating language. You can work in different environments within Symfony, and that has to do with loading different configuration files. Two of these environments are development and production. There's also testing environment, and you can create your own environments too. When you're developing, you'll usually use development environment, as it will have configuration that will make development easier. The cage will be rebuilt each time, so you're always gonna see the latest things, and you're also gonna have like a debug toolbar that can help you out with some things. There's a concept of services. Services are libraries that you can inject within your code so that they're not always loaded. You sort of inject them. That's called dependency injection. You inject them when you need to use them. And Symfony creates a cage as well, so that in production environment the loading of some things is a lot faster. This is just an example of what Twig looks like, the templating engine that I was templating language that I was talking about. So see, this is how you will sort of echo a variable, and that's how you can iterate. And the advantage of using Twig is that it's a lot cleaner than the PHP when you're using PHP templates, but it's really up to you which one you want to use. I prefer using Twig. Databases are treated here. We'll treat them. We'll use an ORM, which is a library, in this case called Doctrine, that will treat databases as if it's object oriented. It's optional. You can use another ORM if you want, or you cannot use one at all. I prefer using it because I find it easier to maintain, easier to work in general, and especially when you're working with other developers. It's a lot easier when you're using an ORM. And Doctrine also allows you to create and update your database using command line tools, which is quite powerful. Configuration files in Symfony can be in different file formats. Most of the core ones are going to be in a format called YML. And then for things such as routing and some Doctrine configurations and some constraints as well, you get to choose if you want to use something called annotations, which are things that you write in the comments area in the PHP file. You can use that, or YML, XML, or just PHP classes. Throughout this course, we'll be using YML for the main configuration files, and then when we get to choose, we'll choose annotations, as it creates less files, so you don't have to be changing through different files that much. But it's really up to you again. So that's one of the things about Symfony, that it's very flexible, and you can adapt it to the way that fits better with your own workflow. Now, where to get help? Symfony.com, the official Symfony website, has two awesome ebooks. One is called The Book, which covers all the basics, and then the Cookbook, which is like a recipe book, has different tips, things you can do with Symfony. There's a Google group that you can write for support if you need, if you have questions, if you're running into issues, and they'll help usually within minutes. You'll get an answer. And there's also an official forum as well. So those are the basic concepts that you need to keep in mind before even looking at the code, as it will make what comes next a lot easier.